Have you ever wondered what it truly feels like when the world you know collapses? When cities burn, armies crumble, and death walks beside you every step of the way? This is the story of Europe's darkest, bloodiest, and most transformative. Centuries, the Germanic invasions that shattered the Roman Empire. Long before modern borders and nation-states, Rome was the heartbeat of civilization. Roads stretched across continents, aqueducts brought life to cities, and marble palaces glimmered with imperial wealth. But beneath this facade of order, cracks were forming, cracks that would widen into yawning chasms as waves of fierce, Germanic tribes stormed the empire's borders. Leaving chaos in their wake, the first cracks, Visigoths, in the Battle of Adrianople in 376 AD, the Visigoths, pushed westward by the Huns, crossed the Danube, seeking refuge within Roman lands. Initially treated as guests, they were betrayed by local officials who exploited them, driving a wedge of anger and resentment. The Visigoths' fury erupted at Adrianople in 378 AD, where they annihilated the Roman army and killed Emperor Valens himself. This was not just a military defeat, it was a psychological earthquake. For the first time, the invincible empire seemed vulnerable. The Visigoths were survivors, strategists, and warriors who understood the art of terror. Their attacks were swift, coordinated, and merciless, sending ripples of panic through Roman provinces. The tide of blood, Vandals, Ostrogoths, and Franks over the next decades, the Germanic invasions intensified. The Vandals carved a devastating path through Gaul, Spain, and finally North Africa, sacking cities and looting treasures that had defined the Roman world. In 455 AD, they captured Rome itself, leaving a trail of destruction so thorough that the word vandalism would later enter our language. Meanwhile, Ostrogoths and Franks poured into Italy and Gaul, laying waste to towns, farms, and communities. Roman legions, overextended and demoralized, could barely mount an effective defense. Villages were razed, families slaughtered or enslaved, and the social order dissolved in fire and blood. No citizen was safe, and no walls could fully contain the chaos. Masters of strategy and terrorwat made the Germanic tribes so deadly. They were not just raiders. They were strategic warriors, masters of ambush and terrain. Unlike the disciplined but rigid Roman legions, these tribes fought for survival and plunder. They moved quickly, struck unexpectedly, and spread fear ahead of them. Even when the Romans won minor victories, the tribes adapted and returned, more vicious than before. Their tactics were brutal yet effective. Rage left towns in ashes. Captured civilians were enslaved or killed. Rivers ran red from the carnage. And through it all, the tribes maintained cohesion, despite centuries of displacement and harsh conditions. They understood that fear was a weapon as powerful as the sword. The fall of Rome by 476 AD, the unthinkable occurred. The last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain. The Western Roman Empire, which had stood for centuries, was gone not in a single cataclysmic battle, but through decades of relentless pressure, betrayal, and societal collapse. This collapse did not happen overnight. It was a slow burn of fire, famine, and fear. As cities fell one by one and millions of lives were shattered, trade routes collapsed, farms went untended, and populations dwindled. The Germanic invasions were not merely military events. They were a human tragedy that reshaped the entire continent. The human cost, the human toll of these invasions was staggering. Families fled into forests and marshes, often starving and freezing. Entire cities were destroyed repeatedly, forcing survivors to adapt or perish. Slavery increased, and the once glorious Roman civilization became a landscape of ruins. But the Germanic tribes were not simply destroyers. They were survivors, hardened by centuries of fighting in icy forests and harsh lands. They endured thrived, and eventually settled, blending with the remnants of Roman society to forge new kingdom. In every act of destruction, there was also creation. They were both executioners and architects of a new Europe. The birth of medieval Europe from the ashes of Rome rose new powers. Visigothic, Ostrogothic, Vandal, and Frankish kingdoms established rule over former Roman territories. Latin persisted in fragments, giving rise to Romance languages. Christianity spread under the guidance of new kings. Laws, culture, and social structures merged in ways that laid the foundations for medieval Europe. Yet, make no mistake, the Germanic invasions were not romanticized epics. They were violent, bloody, and devastating. Millions died, cities were sacked, and empires crumbled. Every advance carried a human cost measured in fire, blood, and terror. Strategy, survival, and brutal ingenuity. What lessons emerged from these? Brutal centuries. The Germanic tribes combined strategy, courage, and adaptability. They capitalized on Roman weaknesses, coordinated raids, and never feared direct confrontation. Their brutality was tempered by intelligence they understood. Survival required both physical strength and strategic thinking. These invasions were also intimate battles. Unlike distant skirmishes with ranged weapons, most attacks were up close, personal, and deadly. Families witnessed the murder of neighbors. Survivors had to flee into forests or fortify makeshift camps. Every day was a test of will, and every victory came at immense cost. A legacy written in blood and culture, the Germanic invasions left a dual legacy. On one hand, Europe endured chaos, famine, and mass death. On the other, these same invasions forged a new continent. Barbarian kingdoms adapted Roman structures, creating a bridge from antiquity to the medieval world. In this crucible, strategy, culture, and human resilience intertwined. Long after the dust settled, stories of courage, fear, and adaptation spread through generations. Mothers and fathers recounted how communities survived, how warriors defended their people, and how fire and blood gave way to creation. The invasions reshaped identity, society, and the very notion of what it meant to survive in a violent world. The beauty of history, the Germanic invasions remind us that history is written not just by rulers or empires, but by the relentless, the bold, and the daring. Fire destroys, but it also clears the way for rebirth. Blood stains, but it also nourishes new life and new orders. Chaos breaks structures, but forges innovation and adaptation. Rome fell, but Europe rose anew. Civilization endured, but only through violence, courage, and the will to survive. The Germanic invasions were more than wars, they were a brutal crucible, reshaping humanity itself. So, here's the question for you, viewer. If you were living in a world of burning cities, collapsing empires, and relentless invaders, could you survive? Would you fight to the last breath, adapt to survive, or fall to the tides of chaos? Tell us what you would do. Comment your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more brutal, unfiltered history that shocks, amazes, and leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew about the past.